Test 1. The given bar chart illustrates the proportion of dwellers who consumed tea and coffee in the different ways in the given cities in Australia. Overall, the main way of drinking coffee and tea was going to a cafe. Except the people in Adelaide, the highest percentages of people visited a cafe to drink coffee and tea in last 4 weeks. Looking at more closely, in Melbourne and Hobart, around 63% and 62% of citizens went to a cafe, and there were just over 60% and 55% in Sydney and Brisbane respectively. In contrast, in Adelaide, the largest portion of people bought instant coffee in last 4 weeks, and that figure was slightly higher than that of people visiting a cafe. Considering the other categories, the second biggest ratios of people in the 4 cities bought instant coffee in last 4 weeks, and the figures were approximately 54%, 53%, 48%, and 46% in Hobart, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney each. Furthermore, in the 5 given cities, the smallest proportions of people bought fresh coffee in last 4 weeks, and in Sydney and Melbourne, the figures were about 44% and 43%. In Hobart, it was roughly 38%, and the figure was just below 35% in Brisbane and Adelaide. Test 2. The given line graph demonstrates how many travellers visited a Caribbean island from 2010 and 2017. Overall, each category shows various features. Considering the number of visitors staying on cruise ships, the figure started at around 1 million, and it rose consistently over the given period approximately to 3.5 million in 2017. It is noticeable that the number of travellers increased sharply between 2016 and 2017. Regarding visitors staying on island, the number was roughly 0.7 million in 2010, and although this figure went up to about 1.5 million in 2013, the figure remained stable at this point for the rest of the period except 2016 when it decreased to nearly 1.3 million. Lastly, when it comes to total, the smallest of tourists visited the whole island in 2010, and there was a fluctuation between 0.3 and 0.5 million from 2010 to 2012. However, after that period, this figure increased constantly to about 2 million in 2017. It is worthwhile to note that the number of tourists in total category surpassed that in staying on island. In conclusion, over the given period surveyed, the highest number of tourists stayed on cruise ships while they're traveling. Test 3. The given flowchart illustrates the process of manufacturing instant noodles. Overall, instant noodles are produced through the 8 stages in aggregate. In the first stage, flour is transferred from storage silos to a production line, and in the second stage, flour is mixed with water and oil in a mixer, and this mixed substance is made into dough sheets through rollers in the third stage. Having completed this stage, dough sheets turn into dough strips in the fourth stage, and this stage is followed by the step of making dough strips into noodle discs in the fifth stage. Having changed into noodle discs, those discs are cooked with oil and dried in the sixth stage. In the seventh stage, those cooked and dried noodles are put into each cup with vegetable and spices. Finally, in the eighth stage, cups are labeled and sealed, completing the whole process of producing instant noodles. In conclusion, each stage plays different roles in manufacturing instant noodles. Test 4. The pie chart given demonstrates what students with anthropology study in their undergraduate course chose to do after their graduation from one university. The table below illustrates how much salary anthropologists received in work after 5 years. Overall, the highest proportion of graduates chose to have full-time jobs, and graduates working in freelance consultants and government sectors received relatively higher salaries than those in private companies after 5 years. Considering the pie chart, more than a half of graduates had their full-time job, and it took up 52%. 16% of graduates chose part-time jobs, but there were also 12% of graduates who became unemployed. Graduates who chose full-time post-grad study accounted for 8%, and it was also unknown that what 8% of graduates did. 5% of graduates chose part-time work and post-grad study at the same time. When it comes to salaries that graduates whose major is anthropology received after 5 years of graduation, in freelance consultants and government sectors, 80% of graduates received $75,000 to $99,999 and $100,000. In contrast, in private companies, the highest percentage of graduates received $50,000 to $74,999 a year, and 30% of them received more than $100,000 a year.